Our next guest is in the studio. I personally must say that it was a long... We spoke on the phone many times. It was a long time coming. But he is here today, and I'm very, very happy. It would have been nice to have him when he was, in other positions. But I think it's even better that he's here now. And before I even tell you what his name is, he stood on the steps of a famous house and told us how things would happen. And because of him, there are phrases that we now use in Kenya today, and they've even become memes. Fellow Kenyans.
Yes.
Fellow Kenyans is here, Mama. MUTAHI Kagwe. Former cabinet secretary. He's here.
When all the nation was shut down and watching.
Fellow Kenyans. Every communication started with fellow Kenyans until Kenyans knew that they were fellow.
But the interesting thing is this. It also set a trend.
It did.
And it set a certain standard that is yet to be beaten, in that you are being communicated to on a daily basis.
Proper.
Now, as far as government communication goes, and the Honorable Minister is a communication person, that particular standard hasn't been met yet. We've never seen government communicating that effectively before then and even after.
It was beautiful to watch.
Yes.
We knew what was going on with COVID.
Yes.
If there was one case in the middle of nowhere, we knew about it. And it was him who stood on the steps.
Yes.
And gave the information and the communication.
If the numbers went down, you knew.
We knew.
If they rose, you knew. In fact, you're so informed, you got to a point of feeling,
okay, we've had enough. Don't tell us tomorrow.
Okay, yes.
We almost know. We knew exactly what he was going to say. MUTAHI Kagwe, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well.
Yeah, good morning, Muga. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Yeah. It's been a minute, like you said.
Yes.
It hasn't even been a minute.
It's been a while, eh?
No, because, right. But we're glad that we're here all the same.
Thank you.
But your Konya is here as well.
Of course I know.
Yes.
Well. Yes.
If I don't get it. So, we're very glad that you're here today.
Thank you.
And you're in the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Indeed.
I cannot promise you that the degrees will turn down.
Yeah, well, I'm ready.
Fantastic.
I'm ready.
But before we turn it up, CT is going to welcome you with a proverb, which we normally do every day. Your job is to interpret that and tell us how it resonates with you.
Yes, our proverbs for this week ending this Friday are from the Republic of Mauritius, the island republic. Okay. When the head is too big, it cannot dodge blows.
He's writing it down.
And?
That's it.
That's it.
Your interpretation.
Your interpretation.
Of this one?
Yes.
Well, it's very apt, if you ask me. It is very appropriate for the day. Because to me, the interpretation I have for it, generally speaking, I assume it simply means, it's simply interpreted to mean that you are too big for your pleasures. Okay, you think you are high and mighty. You listen to nobody, take advice from nobody, and think that you are a man, you are the best thing that has happened to us since sliced bread. So I
don't say what you think, Waziri.
That's what I think. That's what I think. I think it simply means that you should develop some humility. The flip side of it is that you should develop some humility, listen to people a little bit more, take advice when you can, and treat everybody equally. Don't think that you are too big for anybody.
Indeed.
Wow. That's when your head is too big. Because if you don't do that, when the chips are down and people go on the rampage, it's your head they are going to come for.
Indeed.
The big head that can't dodge the
cannot dodge the bullet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Azir, I'd like to say to CT that 3 out of 4 that is significant.
You know what Wanjiru is doing, don't you?
No.
Not only do I know what Wanjiru is doing, I know Wanjiru.
3 different perspectives have come to the same interpretation of your proverb. So,
there you go.
So, CT, what was your intention in giving us that proverb?
Actually,
I think you are making a statement.
No, you asked the question. These proverbs are prepared well in advance. I don't prepare them in the week, no.
Yeah.
Like I can tell you which country we're going to next week, and I can tell you the one the week after that.
So you just pick?
You just pick. And I have 7 proverbs.
Then you go through them.
And I go through them, and I decide which ones. Sometimes I figure. But again, when these proverbs were picked, I didn't know some of the things
that would land
that
today.
They were going to happen.
Yeah, but nature has got a funny way
of bringing things together.
Bringing what is supposed to be brought today. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a message.
It is a very strong one. It's a very strong message. But then again, there is also the interpretation of just how things change, and yet how they remain the same. Because this wasn't done yesterday. The proverb wasn't made yesterday.
Years ago.
The proverb has been there for a long time.
Yes.
So as human beings, we must always be aware that this has happened before.
Yes.
And
Indeed.
it can happen again.
Very true.
Yeah.
So, fellow Kenyans, we're looking at budget and involvement of young people or young business people in politics. But before we get there, you came from a position whereby you were involved heavily in policy. In fact, I kept saying that your head must have been in a whirlwind because you took on the position of cabinet secretary and you were actually going to the World Malaria Forum that week that the first case of COVID, ask me how I know and why I was following you like that, but I do. And that weekend, the first case of COVID then was realized in Kenya, and everything blew up in smoke. And I thought, my goodness, this guy gotta have some girth on him, because first of all, here we are doing something with malaria and other infectious diseases, and then COVID comes and everything takes a spin, and government policy, and you had stood on the steps of Afia House and you had said, we're going to get rid of all of these cartels and we're going to make sure that everything is sorted out. Walk us through what happened at that point to where we are today, and you're talking about the need for people to be involved when it comes to essentially the infrastructure of government. What happens through all of that?
Okay. First of all, let me say thank you for the invitation, because I haven't been here for a while. And as I walk through this building, you know, I was very nostalgic because this is the commercial department and I used to be commercial manager in this place.
Director.
So this year, I was commercial manager, then I became commercial operations director.
Yes.
But this was my team, you know, and when I look at them, I feel for them because I know what they are going through at the moment, given the economy of the country. And therefore, I start from there. I start from feeling that this is not just when I became a minister. This is where I started, right here where we are. So anyway, going back to this, let me just say that it was a very difficult period. I was 12 days old in the ministry when the first case of COVID-19, you know, came in. We knew about this disease because of, you know, Wuhan in China. And also, we were aware that it had hit Italy very, very badly. And Europe was suffering. So we were aware that we were going through a very difficult period. And we also knew that there were some very difficult decisions that were going to have to be made. You know, and it was so bad that when we took, I remember the day very clearly, when I asked in the ministry, how many infectious disease beds do we have in the country? And I was told we had 8. And I said, what do you mean 8? 8 as in this hospital? And I said, no. 8 as in the Republic. So you can imagine, you know, starting from there, and you are being told that thousands of people are going to need infectious disease beds. So it was a very, very, very tough time. But I'll tell you one thing. One, we had a very good team. It took teamwork. It's not an individual's. You can't praise one individual. It took teamwork. And we had the president who was listening to us, you know, and guiding us and telling us what decisions do you need to make. And the second thing is that we had very many experts. You know, we pulled in a team from the University of Nairobi, JK, Moi University. We pulled in a team of epidemiologists who are very good in their job. And we put them together in a room. Sometimes you separate them, tell us a case, give us your scenario, let's try and combine these scenarios so that we can make informed decisions. So we were not just speaking, it wasn't just MUTAHI Kagwe coming there and saying what he thinks. It's a question of what is the science behind the decisions that we are making.
Right.
And therefore, even when they were making different decisions in Europe, we would say that's a European decision. But we have our own decisions because of our own environment. And sometimes I would get calls even from them, from ambassadors around, and say, MUTAHI, what is this decision that you have made? You're not closing down this thing. And I say, yeah, the science doesn't say that. You say, you know, they have closed in the UK, they have closed in Israel. Say, we are not closing. Why? The science doesn't indicate that. That's what my experts are telling me. So I think teamwork, first and foremost, use experts, the use of experts, and then a nation that listened, you know, because people listened. I mean, of course, you have the errant people who always do their thing, but largely, people listened. And the third thing that I think was important is what you have just said, communication. You know, we knew that there was a lot of panic in the country. We knew that people needed information. This is a science-based issue. It's not a political issue. So we had to communicate with them. And you remember this, as you are saying, this communication from the podium virtually every day. Yeah. If it wasn't me, then it was one of our people in the Ministry of Health. And sometimes we also invited other ministers, other cabinet secretaries to come and make the decisions. For example, during the Islamic holidays and so on, we had Najib Balala come and give some of those communications because we knew there were some things you would say that were understood better, you know, coming from a fellow Muslim than from a Christian who probably doesn't understand.
Well, it's not sensitive to those matters.
Yeah, I'm not sensitive. Yeah. We also had sometimes very sensitive cultural rights that we had to go against. And therefore, when those things were happening, sometimes we would call, I remember calling the late C.S. Magoha to come and help me, you know, because of the rights that were happening some places in Nyanza. And we wanted to communicate to them that we can't do them. You know, but rather than me go there and tell them this is what you must do and feel like you are I'm communicating to them rather than with them, you know, so we had several changes and several communication systems that we had to put in place, you know, for people to listen. We had the Mwangangi, you know, talking to the youth because she was more youthful than we were. And therefore, you know, and the youth listened. You know, at some point they say, don't even talk to us now. We have got our own communication. Bring her in, you know. So, yeah, it took quite a bit of work. It took quite a bit of communication skills. But largely, I'm grateful to Kenyans because they listened.
Yeah, you know, and I'd just like to chime in to say, because of your leadership and because of the style and really all that you're saying here, the teamwork, the science-based decision-making, working across the sectors and very clear communication, I think the country, the people of Kenya fared much better. I think we dealt with COVID, which was, I mean, such a difficult situation, but your leadership really made it manageable. And so I think I would like to echo what Ndu and Siti have said. There's something else very exciting that came out for me in the conversation, and it came out very quickly, which was about the community-based health system. And I think you went, you know, worked quite fast even to preparing a community, was it a community health-based bill?
Yes.
I haven't tracked that process to see whether the bill got enacted. I know now we've gone into community health workers. I don't know if we got the spirit of what was supposed to happen. We now have shift coming in. What I'm asking is, do you think the changes that are taking place are in the spirit of the discussions you are having, that really responses need to be bottom up as opposed to top-down healthcare?
I don't think so. And as I've said before in many interviews that I've gone to, I do not like to criticize, you know, the office which I held. You know, I don't like criticizing the person who is holding the office because I assume that they're operating on a philosophy and policy that probably guides the challenge of the day. But let me say this. Whatever the situation is, I think you need to understand what the end game is so that you can start planning now. Unless you have an end game, then it doesn't really work. For example, on the community health workers, the reason why community health workers are so important in this country is because, you know, first, the real small issues that arise that can jam a hospital and should not actually be taken to a hospital. There are people who can deal with them at home. Community health workers are very, very important. In a country like Cuba, for example, you'll find that even the doctors work within the community health system. So that within a community group, there are doctors. And medicine goes to people rather than people come to medicine. And that's a huge philosophical change in thinking. So my view is that it's an area I don't feel there is sufficient emphasis. I don't think we completed ourselves in emphasizing the situation enough. But I think that is where it should all go. Family doctors, as they are called, family doctors do not wait for people to come to the clinics. They go to the people. For example, within the community, if you know that there are 3 pregnant women, then the doctor has got a rota of when to go and visit those women, where they are in their own homes. That's the role of the community health system, and it works very, very well if it is sufficiently funded, sufficiently trained, and sufficiently appreciated.
So you talk about, and this is the thing that I think that we saw a similar thread running in, whether it's the involvement of new faces. I mean, and everybody, when we look at how this communication happened and how certain things happened then, and we say it then like it's 10 years ago, but it was 3 short years ago.
Yeah.
And then here where you are in 2024, where certain other things are happening politically, at a policy level, whereby we're saying that there must be budget and involvement of people across board. How is that supposed to happen?
Okay, let's put it this way. What you are seeing right now with the Gen Z group, so to speak, and I do hope that as we speak, nobody is in jail. I hope that they have all been released. I hope they are all at home, and I'm very proud of them personally. I think that, you see, there has to be a congruence between the government agenda and a common citizen's agenda. Those two things have to work together. What you are seeing, and the reason why you are seeing this gap, is because the citizens are thinking one thing and the government is thinking another. And the communication about what the government thinking is not there. Okay? So that if first and foremost, people have to pay taxes of some sort or other. Because it is how governments survive, it is how governments run. But you see, if you want me to pay taxes, you've got to convince me why I am paying those taxes. If you go back a little bit to about 20 years back, and you remember in 2002, when the Honorable Mwai Kibaki, the late president, took over, the government was doing very badly. We were borrowing a lot of money, but his idea was to close the gap between what we were borrowing and what we were producing in the country. And people volunteered to pay taxes. Why? Because people knew exactly where those tax money was going to. So if you can communicate enough that this is why these taxes are here. So if you're general, you have to start from what's the end game again. My end game would be to create jobs. All right, let's create jobs. Because when you see the Gen Zs in the streets, the reason why they're in the street is because they have been fired from their jobs. They can't afford food. Okay, and these are my kids we are talking about, because me and my Gen Z dad. Right. All right. So it is my kids I'm talking about, and I can see it. That's why you find grown people living in their mother's home, in their mother's homes, and in their father's homes. They can't afford to live. So when that is what is happening, your agenda, the common agenda that you must have, is to say whatever taxation regime that you are going to have in place must be the one that is responsive to that situation, so that anybody who creates a job gets a tax break. Because that's the idea. The idea is to create jobs. All right? So is this tax I'm proposing going to A, lower the tax of living, B, create jobs? Two things. Lower the cost of living and create jobs. Nice. So if you communicate that that's what you are trying to do, that's why I'm taxing you so that I can get this done, then you'll find that people's response We'll be, yes, we are going to go through a tough time, but we know why it's happening. But when I'm being fired, and then I'm being told bread is going to cost you more, I'm like, are you kidding? Is this for real? You know, you don't believe it. So I think that the issue at hand is, what is your end game? What do you want to achieve? What's your objective? Surely the objective cannot, taxing people is not an end in itself. You know, the budget is not an end in itself. The budget is a means to an end. So what is this end that you're talking about? And you cannot tell us that you are taxing us so that I can pay a debt. You guys in the Uhuru administration, you went and borrowed money. Yes. We are gone. We are not there. Tell us what you're doing, not what happened. Nobody is interested in history, otherwise go to class and teach history. What? You know, so this is about, what are you going to do? What's your end game? And if you can communicate to Kenyans what your end game is, I think they'll accept what you're saying.
Okay, what's your end game? I think it's interesting that you brought that up. What's your end game? And looking at how you practice that within communication and information that you share with people to the present day conversations that are happening around government and how Kenyans ought to be involved in all of this. Is it possible to have a government operating, listening to its people and bringing them in on issues of policy, data, information? Is it possible to involve everybody? Because they say, you know what, if everything that we need to do as government is brought to the people and discussed, we're never going to get anything done because everybody's going to have their opinions. That's one argument that is given. May not make sense, but it comes across.
Well, you know, first of all, let's differentiate between listening and hearing because they are two different things. And I think that a lot of times people are not actually listening, all right? They're just hearing things. You know, they're out there and they have gone out there not with the intention. Our constitution mandates us to listen to the people, and public hearings are part of the process of lawmaking in this country. But you have to make public hearings meaningful. And there are two sides to that. The citizens themselves have got to make public hearings meaningful, so that when you go to make a presentation, you go to make a serious presentation, a well thought out presentation. On the flip side of it is that the committees and the committees of parliament are the ones that are responsible for public hearings. They have got to go and listen, and actually listen and hear what people are saying. Now, it all depends on where you came from, If your idea was to create some political capital, where, for example, you go there and you say, I'm going to tax bread 16%, I am going to tax sanitary pads, I'm even going to tax diapers. Diapers.
For goodness sake.
What am I missing here? You know? So you know very well people are going to make noise. You know very well people are going to complain about bread, because that's the last thing that you tax. But you are doing it so that you put people in this pit hole, all right? You make people jump into a hole. You watch them scream inside there. Then you lift them up for them to praise you. You say, oh, you are so kind, you removed us. You are so nice, you removed tax on bread. It wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. Nobody in his right mind is going to do that right now. So you know very well this is just a political.
What are you saying, Mutahi?
I am saying in my mind it was never supposed to be there.
Sure, we can say it was not supposed to be there, but are you saying that it was put there knowing full well that it would be removed?
Absolutely.
In order for this glorification that you're talking about to happen?
I believe it. It is the only explanation. There is no other explanation that I can see. Because you cannot honestly tell me that at a time when Kenyans are crying as much as they are, you go out there and say, guess what? You know, it's not enough that you are crying. I'm going to put some tax on bread. Yep. And you're talking about babies? I'm going to tax your babies too. And women here are screaming and making so much noise about other things. Forget about the dress. I'm going to tax your sanitary pads too. Oh, seriously. And you expect me to believe that this is what you intend to do? I don't believe it. I believe that what you want to do, there is this tendency, this philosophy of put people in the hole, remove them from the hole, and they will praise you. So take us to Canaan. We are in Canaan. Take us to Egypt. so to speak. Take us to Egypt. We'll bring you back from Egypt, and you'll be our Moses. All right. So I honestly believe that there is no way anybody would have proposed those kind of taxes at this particular time. So forgive me if I don't believe it. I just don't see it. I see it simply as a political maneuver. All right. But they have been called out. All right. It has been called out. And I think that next time, and that was an end game. You're talking about end games. To me, that was an end game. It didn't work. I think it has backfired. I think that Kenyans are not going to praise anybody because of saying that you're not going to tax bread. There are some other taxes that are still there, that need to be looked at. And I hope that in the amendments, during the amendments stage of the bill, there will be more amendments that will be made. Now, I want to emphasize that I appreciate that countries must be financed through taxation. But it is important for us to ask ourselves, we are taxing to end where? All right? Where do we want to go when we tax? That's essentially what I'm saying. And therefore, when you see people in the streets, they get it. All right? Not to paraphrase.
They don't get it?
They don't get it. I think they get it.
Yeah.
I think they get it very well and very clearly. And therefore, I think that the generations that we have, the Kenyan of today, is not a person who can be fooled easily. They can see right through your machinations.
Do you think things are changing? So are they different in character that you then cannot continue to deliver government? And I say deliver government deliberately. One of the things that you said that stuck in my mind for a very long time is if you treat this thing normally, it'll then come and treat us abnormally later. That's interesting because you came up with so many things that we can use today. And that in that instance, we were talking about COVID. But here we are and we're saying, if you take the way the country has presented itself, whereby you have a now woke generation of people who are saying, you know what, we're not just going to take this lying down. You have people who've been supporting the cause before who say, no, it cannot continue like this. It has to shift. Do you think that the character of the situation has changed to the point whereby any forward-thinking, leaning government has to take these changes into consideration? Otherwise, it'll turn on its head.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. You have put it as best as anybody would. You see, every generation is different from the previous one, from the previous generation. And what we are seeing today is a generation that is extremely exposed. When we were growing up, there was only one phone in the village. Somewhere where they used to ring, and then you would call the operator, and then the operator would call you 2 hours later and tell you whether he has connected you. That's the world we grew in.
Oh, goodness.
These people are growing up in a completely different world altogether. We are talking about a people who are extremely exposed, as I said. We are people who are extremely knowledgeable, much smarter than we were ever were at that age. And for a long time, this is also a generation that has stayed away from politics, that stayed away from public responsibility. And here comes the crunch. They have been pushed and pushed to the extent that they have now clearly realized that it's their lives, that politics is what makes their lives. Like Moi said, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. It has dawned on them now that it's about us. If we have a poor government, if we have members of parliament who can't defend a budget, then it is we who will suffer. It is our jobs that will go. And I think that realization has pushed them to the point where now they are taking responsibility. What you saw yesterday is part of the process of taking responsibility and taking the bull by the horns, so to speak. That was a very historic and momentous occasion in our nation to realize that people do not need to be led by a famous politician to object to a situation that they don't like. Yeah. And I think that if anybody didn't realize it, if it didn't dawn on anybody, then that person is blind. As blind as you can get. Yes, Wanya.
Can I jump in there? There's something you said that's really provoked me. I was there yesterday in the backgrounds trying to figure out what's happening. Just really mystified. I haven't done very many marches. I've done enough in my time. And it wasn't a march. It was just the way Gen Zs do their thing. So it was an amazing energy. And in the process, there were also celebrities on the ground. And when you talk about, we had written off, maybe there was this perception that Gen Zs like the soft life. In fact, there's a song that had come out about soft life about 2 years ago. And the musician who sang that song, Blinky B, was at the march yesterday. So as you said that, I made this association and said, this is the soft life generation. And they've come out and they've said enough with these, this political misbehavior. And I love the character they brought to the march. It's creative. Their communication, you're a communication expert. And we've seen Gen Zs are expert plus. They are explaining the finance bill in 3 short minutes so that anyone can understand. And I was watching the news yesterday, and the commentary from around the country by ordinary Kenyans was so clear on what they want, what they expect, what is wrong. But to the question that Ndu is asking, I think the revolution, because it's a revolution, it's a transformation. It's a social transformation, it's a revolution, one way or the other, because we are moving from one paradigm, one political paradigm to another. This is a political-centric, this is a citizen-centric, is happening. But there are some barriers, and you were talking about jobs. What needs to happen? Because as I was sitting there, I was saying, okay, the youth are ready. I think these youth are ready.
What are they ready for?
And what support do they get so that they can sustain this? Because they are saying, I think they are ready to take the political, to enter the political space, to make political decisions.
Would you therefore say that that's where the real revolution has taken place? Because this was a generation that had shown zero interest in politics. And then suddenly now, not taking interest, they are taking center stage.
And I would say they had shown zero interest because even if you look at the elections registration, the voter registration, we had a large section of youth that did not bother to register. Then another large section did not bother to vote because they were disaffected. So actually their protest had been happening. They were looking and saying this isn't adding up, and now they've come out. So they are ready.
Would you say that soft life of theirs was affected in some way or the other?
How would you
maybe that's what needed to be done.
There you go.
Yeah. And they realized, wait a moment, this thing that I'm ignoring actually affects my life in ways I did not actually.
And look at what has happened.
But isn't there always an opportunity where that iron strikes and then you see that something needed to happen in order for those waters to break through?
I think the following. First of all, let me just emphasize what Wanjiru said about the inertness, the ignorance with which young people have been treating politics. And we've been talking about this for a long time. Some 5 million Kenyans, 5 million people who were eligible to vote did not even register to vote. 5 million of them. 8 million registered but did not even vote. All right? 8 million of them. So you're talking about some 13 million. The President of the Republic of Kenya was voted in with some 7-point-something million votes. That tells you that the non-registered and non-voting people are enough to choose a president themselves. That's
a political agenda.
That's the biggest of the lot.
But what you say is an interesting perspective because we've had it happening before at the dawn of multipartyism, where you would find we didn't have these laws of 50+1. The president of the day wins with less than 40% of the votes. But they win, meaning...
In fact, sometimes, one time it was 36%.
Yes, one time it was 36%, which means those who didn't vote for you are more than those who voted for you.
How would you know that those who are in positions, and it doesn't matter whatever level, because here we are talking about governance, broad strokes, how would you know, or how would we be convinced that those who sit in positions of governance then are taking these taking these positions into consideration, the voice of the people, the voice of those who are, in young business, the voice of students, at the very, from bottom to top, how would we see, what would the manifestation of that be?
Well, I think the proof of the pudding, as they say, is in the eating. In this sense, what is it that they want? What is it that the citizens want? If the citizens are getting what they want, if we are moving towards the citizens' common agenda, then yes, that is, we are succeeding in what we want to do. But more importantly, and to the topic of the day, is to realize that now that the citizens, now that the Gen Z and other people, and even older people, are now realizing the importance of the political space in terms of their lives and their lifestyles, I think that one of the things that will come to bear, that must come to bear, is that not only must they be in the streets, which is a good thing because they are expressing their constitutional right. And I think that it's wrong, and I must also say this, it is wrong for the police to interfere with a peaceful demonstration. Gen Zs are not violent. There was no expression of any violence. There was no stone thrown anywhere. And I think that the best that the police should do is to protect the demonstrators and to just govern so that walk along them, do whatever you want, observe the demonstrations, but do not start violence. These are your children. You're starting violence on. So I would say, to a large extent, it's not all the policemen, by the way, who are violent.
Sure. Because
if all the police were violent, then it would have been a melee, a violent melee out there. But I think that those who are violent, and we watch them on TV, should not have done that. Let people demonstrate peacefully. Let them make noise, all right? Noise is a way of expression. And you can't arrest somebody because they are shouting or making noise. And I think one of the things that happened to this nation is that the democratic space has entrenched itself so deeply that there is no amount of violence that can be able to defeat it today. All right? It's going to be there. The second point of this is this. I think that the involvement, to your point, if you really want to see change, the involvement of Gen Z and other younger people, and I particularly want to address the Gen Zs who are in business, because one of the missing links in politics, if you ask me today, is that there are not enough voices talking issues that relate to people's lives. In other words, how informed are the younger people who are pretending to be in parliament, in county assemblies? How informed are they in order for them to create this change? It is not enough that you just put a young person there. The young person has to have the ability and capacity, to inform change. And I think that what has happened in the past, and I hope that this is going to change, is that young successful people see politics as a dirty thing that they don't want to get involved in. All right? That is something. I'm a businessman. And I can tell you, when I was 30 years old, working in this place where we are now, in the Standard Group, I was invited by some 4 wazees in Nyeri County who told me that I should join politics. I told them I have got a very good job at the Standard. I have no intentions of ever joining politics because I'm not a politician. Politics is for some other people. And an old man, the late Councillor Kiongo, told me at that point, and I remembered it in 1996 when I was going broke in my business. He told me that you will come to realize one day that these businesses you are so fond of, these businesses that you are doing, will be nothing if the politics is not right. If the politics is not right, these businesses that you are doing, these jobs that you are creating, you'll not be able to create if the politics is not right. And I think that this is what the younger generation must come also to see. Years later, I saw it with my own eyes. I experienced it myself when when Moi printed money in 1992, when we had hyperinflation, the business that I had started, having left the Standard, collapsed. Inflation went hyper. Interest rates went to 46%. All right? And there was no way. Unless you are running a cocaine business, there is no way you are going to survive. So, and that was politics, printing of money. So, and why are so we have to come to realize that we want this young generation to produce able people. And how are they going to get involved? I'll propose 3 ways. The first one is that they must identify individuals, and we, older politicians, must participate in this. And you must participate in this city. All right?
Older politicians.
You people who are not politicians must also come to the table and say, I know that this young lady called Wanjiru can do it. All right? But she's shy. She doesn't want to get dirty. She doesn't want to get in there. We must call her in, convince her that you should do it. All right? Gandhi in India, Gandhi, the fight for India and the freedom of India was bought by Gandhi. Gandhi was a lawyer. At some point, when he went back to India from South Africa, he didn't actually want to get involved until the federal lawyers called him and said, no, this is what this is not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be leading the people, not here sitting in a law firm. Okay? And that's what happened. So the first thing is identifying and convincing those people. The second thing to say is that not all young people, not all business people are going to be politicians.
Yeah.
Thank God, not all of them. So that a majority of them are going still to be doing business and creating jobs, which is really what we want. But they must also have their friends, their kin, their people of similar minds, similar thinking, working within Parliament so that they can support them. So those who are not going to join politics should then provide ideas, should then provide funding, support for those who are going to be in the field fighting for themselves. Is going to do this, which is the third thing. What we are trying to do is raise the level of our politics. All right? We remove gangsterism from politics and raise the level so that people can feel comfortable being in politics. A lot of young ladies, for example, don't feel comfortable at all being in the political space. Why? Because of the gangsterism nature of politics. And I think that we need to raise that level. We need to raise the level of debate, and so on. One of the things that the president said yesterday, and which to a point was true, is that today everybody is debating about the finance bill.
Yes.
All right? Everybody is debating about the finance bill. Everybody is aware of that there is a debt and so on. I agree with him. Thank God that is happening, because if they want, then you would have passed a bill, that has got some very dirty things in it. Having said that, the issue is, even as we pass the bill today, what are we doing it for? What is it we want to do? How are we going to measure the success of the budget that we have put forth? Can we say, how many jobs, for instance, do we want to create by the end of the financial year? So that we can say, we are taxing you because by the end of this financial year, this is the number of jobs
that we will have,
that we want to create. And this is the way we are doing it. We are reducing duty on manufacturing goods, all right? We are paying pending bills, because pending bills have been there for a very long time. Kibaki time, Uhuru time, and they are still there. But if you can come up with a solution and tell us we are paying the pending bills to the young business people so that they pay, so that they can create jobs.
Let me ask you this question. Your position is a very unique one. Even the time you went into politics and the various things you've done in politics, from member of parliament to being a minister, to being a senator, to being a minister again. Now that you're not involved in active politics, or no, you may be involved in active politics, but you don't have a political seat. When you're in and out of politics, there's knowledge you glean. There's an understanding of certain things that you acquire when you're in there and then when you're out. Why is it that political parties, and you belong to some, why is that we have never seen them nurturing young members of their political parties to do the very thing that we're discussing now? Because then the pool of young people who would have been nurtured, and in being nurtured would have been imbued with the understanding that they in turn, when the turn comes, would nurture people who would carry on the very things we're saying.
Well, Siti, let me first say this. like Martin Luther King said, it is always the right time to do the right thing. And that's why we are speaking. That's why we are here. That's what we are trying to do now. All right? This is what we are talking about, young people getting involved. I think that, for a long time, political parties in this country have had only one purpose, to go to parliament.
Yes.
To get elected, period. If you ask anybody the difference between Party A and Party B in terms of ideals, in terms of philosophy, you'll find that there is none.
None.
The only difference, the only different thing I remember is way back in 1997 when the Social Democratic Party, wanted to take space in this country. And we did run a campaign in 97 that had some members of parliament.
It was a good campaign.
With a very clear agenda.
Philosophical.
Objective, with clear policies about the stuff that we wanted to do in this country. All right? And unfortunately, for whatever reason at the time, the party did not grow, the way it was supposed to grow. And I think that if you look at other countries, if you look, for example, just south of us, to Tanzania, the Chama cha Mapinduzi has been there for a very long time. I think KANU would have done it. I think KANU would have been the party that people stuck to had they moved with the times. The problem is that they let a generation go and continued, and then they shifted from an interest in the country to an interest in self. I think that what has happened over the years, and the reason why you find that these parties are not taking deep, very deep, conscious decisions to recruit and to move forward, is that the intention was never that.
Right, from the get-go.
From the get-go. The intention was simply to go to parliament. And then on the next one, you'll get into another bus.
Right.
And then do the same thing. It's unfortunate.
It is.
But that is the
reality
truth.
Of the day. And
that's why we need these new, young business people, young philosophers, young journalists, in parliament.
Right.
So that they can make a difference and create some of those things.
And do you think that is because... it looks as though, here we're going to go over a few minutes, and it looks as though there is the need to form some kind of gate or cage over new people, as opposed to saying, let's let them find their space. Are we saying that those who've been there before need to show the way to the new ones who will come forward, or are we just going to let them go through and find their way?
I think it's a combination of the two. We need new energy. We need an infusion of ideas, always, all the time. It doesn't matter whether there's a new business. Even this place where we are in, you always need an infusion of new ideas and new business people and new concepts that people have created over time. Because the problem with having been there for a long time is getting comfortable. You get comfortable in your space and you think that things will always be the way they are, which is falsehood. They will always change. There is dynamism in life that you cannot stop. Therefore, I think the answer to your question is that we need new people to come in. We also need some of the experienced people in government so that there is something to learn from. You have got people to gain from. And there is also institutional memory. One of the problems of one of the problems that we have is lack of institutional memory, whether deliberate or otherwise. You'll find that you run a ministry for 5 years. Instead of the next minister coming in and continuing to do what they are doing, they start other things, start writing new papers, start writing new things, whatever, and then 3 years down the line, they move out and another paper starts.
There you go.
This issue of continuity is crucial for development. And I think that, therefore, let's bring these young people in. And when I say young, I'm not talking about people in their 20s or people in their teens. I'm talking about a generation that is there between the 35s and 45-year-olds who are nowhere. They are not participating. And they are able and they are smart and they can do it. These are the people I'm trying to encourage to come in and take their space.
And change things. It's been good having you here. I wish we could do this more often. And it's an open invitation for you to come back. Say yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think we must start behaving abnormally, at the moment for the situation to go back to normal.
There's not a better way to end it this morning. Thank you for being here and thank you for being part of the conversation in the Situation Room this morning.
This is the Situation Room. the only way to start your day.